over at the S Network. Nobody does games better than you. Are you surprised that you've done this well?
I didn't know what to expect. I got out of the game. John Filippelli, who was the head of Yes at the time, actually said, "I want you to come into the studio. We're going to try to, teach you some things, and I think you could, let's do 10, 20 appearances and see what happens." And so I walk in the first night, and there's a pregame show, and he's like, "You know what? Let's just start today." And I walked in, no sport coat, no nothing. I had somebody's sport coat on, and I didn't know anything about TV. So, like, red lights are going off, and I'm looking over here, and they're yelling in my ear. The worst thing you do on television and radio, or even in the booth, is while you're talking, somebody is talking in your ear, because you have these earpieces in. And for people that know what they're doing, they have no problem. But for people like me that, I don't know, maybe I'm ADHD or something, but when somebody talks, I stop talking. So like, if I'm saying, hey, this guy's got a really good swing tonight, and it's really hard for me. That's the hardest thing to get over.
I remember sitting on the floor at the hour where you were just retired, you were thinking about going into TV, you started dabbling with it, you'd done a couple of these, and you said, "I don't know if I could do it. I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know, what am I going to talk about?" I said, "What are you going to talk about? Just tell us anything. I mean, anything that you," because I think you realize how high level of credibility you have. Because people always saw you wore it, you played it out, there was never any hiding how you felt.
And that's the thing, that you think you have to do so much when you don't know anything about it. If people want to hear stories, people want to hear what happened at certain times. That's why it's a big joke up there. I don't go up there with notes. I don't go up there with numbers, because, anybody in this room could go up there and read every statistic, every number about chances of this. And to me, I kind of play the game through my mind and kind of get a gut feeling of what's going to happen here or there, and that's what you talk about. And to me, it makes it more fun. But again, when you've never done it and you go back to that day at the Doral, you don't know what to expect. And I have progressively, upped the games. This year I'm up to almost 60 games, so it'll be a challenging year. The Yankees are playing well. It makes it much more fun. Then the Winter Storm last year, the first half, there's nothing worse than trying to announce a game where the team loses and never scores a run. Because there's nothing to talk about. It's like 1, 2, 3, all right, we'll see you next inning. 1, 2, 3, all right, we'll see you next inning. And it's really, there's nothing to add to it. But, when there's exciting plays and there's young players and there's a future, it makes it exciting for everybody. And, nowhere like New York do you go through a rebuilding process and you're expected to win also, which to this point they have. So that's been fun.
Why baseball? How did baseball come around for you? I mean, when I think about, you had winning before you came here, so you've had a long baseball career. Why baseball? What got you started?
I grew up, my father was in the minor leagues. He went to the service, lost basically his career to that. He was our Little League coach. I had 4 older brothers who I pretty much idolized going to their games. So that was, depending on what season it was, that was what we were doing. It was baseball, basketball, or football. And truth be known, in high school, I thought I was going to play basketball.
So you got some height.
And I love the game of basketball. There's nothing more fun on a Friday night to play in a hot gym with the crowd and cheerleaders and everything. It added a lot. But,
3? You were 3 or you
Yeah, I was a 3, and a very left-handed one at that. But then, you start hearing pro scouts saying, hey, what, we're going to draft you, and, there's some money involved. When you're 18, you think, where do I sign? Let's go, let's get this going. And I actually had, was in the University of South Florida. I was staying with Robin Roberts, who was the
great pitcher for the Phillies.
Yeah, he was a Hall of Fame pitcher for the Phillies, and he was coaching them. And he said, I threw in the bullpen. He said, kid, I'll give you a full ride scholarship. And that's all I wanted to do at that point was go to Florida, because growing up in Ohio, you play 15 games a year, and kind of like the weather here. It's 40 degrees and raining, and it's just, I wanted to go somewhere warm. and can still remember that back then the draft would just go along the bottom of the television. There wasn't a live broadcast, anything. And I found out that I was drafted third pick by the Reds. And Robin Roberts flat out told me, kid, if you want to play pro ball, go play pro ball. And I look back at that and think, what a neat thing. Because he could have said, hey, you got to come to college, this and that. And years after that, I would see him almost every year with the Reds when I went to Philadelphia, and we would joke about it. But wonderful advice. It worked for me, but I always, respected him for that.
The '98 team, we were just talking about that, and special team.
Best team I ever played with. No
What
doubt.
made that team so special? What was going on that maybe we didn't know and didn't see?
Well, I mean, '96 happened so quick, we were kind of unknown. And then, '97, also I was talking out in the hall, was probably the most disappointing loss that I ever remember. Because you just win '96, you fight all year to get back. '97, you think you have it in the bag. Alomar hits a home run off of Mariano.
I remind him about it all the time.
And, I can still remember, I was hitting with 2 outs in the ninth, and I hit an absolute rocket off Jose Mesa, and it went off the top of the wall, which would have tied the game. And I always say, that's the trouble with being a line drive hitter, because they don't always go out of the ballpark. And then Bernie ended up flying out, and just the disappointment of having to wait a whole year to get back to that spot just to fight. And I truly believe that disappointment kind of instills a fear in you of not wanting to go through it again. And I think it had a lot to do with what happened in '98, '99, and 2000. So, but back to that team.
Sometimes the losing gives you a blueprint for winning, right?
And it motivates you because you don't want to go through it again. It's an unbelievable.
It's an awkward team you got there. I mean, you got a lot of characters.
Oh, there's no doubt. But you go through that '98 team, and seldom do you see a team that's put together with really good players. Really good players all have great years, and you don't have injuries. And that's, if you wrote down the 3 things that made that team great, there's no doubt that was the closest I was on a team to perfection. It just, everything worked. I think, what was 125 and 50 when all the numbers were done. I mean,
Who
that's just...
surprised you on that team, though? Who's the big surprise?
I look back at some of those games. Duque was new, kind of in. I loved playing behind him. But surprising, I mean, Darryl Strawberry.
Is coming on.
Yeah, but they had become players. Jeter was still surprising everyone because he became, just the face of the Yankees, and it just, like I said, it was almost comical. I remember one time we had won 6 or 7 in a row when we were in Oakland, and next thing you know, we're down 3 runs, 9th inning, it's like, all right, long trip back, we had a great road trip, and next thing you know, Joe Torre tells Strawberry, hey, you're going to pinch hit. Grand slam. We went in the bottom of the ninth, and top of the ninth. It's just like things like that just continually happened that year, and it just was a magical year with great players. And I just look back at being very fortunate to be part of that team.
When you see this team, give me a little bit of a feeling. Like, if you're in the clubhouse, what does this team need to know? What's important? You look at a Judge or a Sanchez and some of these young kids. Castro, you've been a big fan of Castro.
I have been.
Give us a little insight to those players. Are we expecting too much, or is this right on track to what?
Well, I think if you assume that, Judge is on pace to hit 104 home runs, yeah, you might be expecting him to hit 200.
You like Judge so far?
Absolutely.
What you're seeing?
I mean, everybody knows his power. I mean, look at his size, but I mean, the catch he made the other day. I mean, he's an all-around player. He's a defensive player. He's a good player. He's going to become better. He's made huge strides from last year as far as not swinging the pitches out of the strike zone. And the thing that I like what is going on right now is if you take a team, you don't want everybody hot at one time because everybody goes cold at one time. So they get off to a good start. Headley's off to a great start. Now he's cooled off. Gardner was off to a horrible start. Now he's on fire. Judge was on fire. Sanchez has not gone through his hot streak yet, and he will. He's too good a hitter not to. Gregorius gets back in the lineup, he's hot. And then you have your second baseman, Castro, who I think has come into his own to become the player that he really can be. And you have some people, Torres just got called up to AAA. Is he on his way up here? I don't know, but again, it's another star waiting to happen once they get here. The pitching it's gonna have to be kind of messed with, there's no doubt about it. Starting wise, you might see another starting pitching. If Chapman comes back healthy, everybody goes back to their spot. So the team is set up. Bird's another example of somebody that could come in and if he's healthy and gets back to where he was in spring training, could really help this team offensively. So it's a fun team to watch because there's a big mix of young kids that bring a lot of energy and a lot of just like, they're like puppies out there. They just run around and they just have, they just do things where, veteran players have a plan and you've gone through it before, but you need that energy. And I think that both sides of the spectrum are kind of pushing each other now.
And they love to compete. They're not giving up.
They don't give up.
There's no give up. You can't leave this game early, no matter what the score is.
See.
One last thing before we get to the audience for Q&A is, give me one good story, give me a little insight on Joe Torre. I know you guys had a great relationship, great manager, obviously Hall of Famer. What kind of manager was he? But sometimes we forget to mention, a lot of guidance behind those teams. What was he like?
He was, to me, the perfect person to bring in here. He understood that players were people, that what happened in your life can affect how you play on the field. It wasn't just, there's a lot of managers out there, believe me, that when you hit a home run, they're your best friend. And then when you strike out the next day, they don't even want to look you in the eye. And as a player, you feel that. Joe Torre knew, and I'll never forget, he came in one year and he said, I know what it's like to win a batting title, and I know what it's like to hit 240. And I did it back-to-back years, and I tried the same. So he understood the season of baseball, how long it is. And just the effort doesn't always put it together, but he also knew what it took to win. And that was people that understood that winning was more important than what I did today or what you would do tomorrow. And we finally got on to that thing where I think everybody understood that everybody gets your just due when you win. And I'll tell you what, if you win in New York, people don't forget it. I mean, I'm down in Florida, I'm in Ohio, I'm in South Carolina, and it's just like, people come up and tell me stories from 97, 98, and it's the coolest thing, it gives you goosebumps, because they remember it. My wife thinks I'm crazy, because I remember certain pictures from 1996, but I can't remember where I was supposed to get the grocery
line
store.
drive off the wall with Trouts.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I mean, it just,
Bernie slide out.
that's the way that, your mind works. And
Probably remember the count you hit that line drive off of too.
yeah, it was early in the count, 0-1. Mesa, I had hit him
Just
well,
saying.
too.
One last thing I just gotta ask you is a quick cheater story. I mean, so many that's been written, said, but was he as fun as people? We know he didn't love the media and stuff, but as far as talking a lot to the media, but was he a prankster, fun guy?
He liked to kind of stir the pot a little bit. Yeah, he wasn't the guy that would, do the stupid stuff, light your shoes on fire in the dugout or something, that people do. It's just like, that stuff's over, it's corny. But, he would stir the pot, and those kind of jokes and that kind of camaraderie adds to chemistry and adds to the team. And, as much as I never saw anybody, and I used to tell him this, I mean, even his rookie year, I would get up in the morning, I would have my pancakes, I would do this. I was out for batting practice at 4. I mean, you had a schedule. And by the game, you were ready. Jeet would get up and have a photo shoot at 9, meet somebody at 10, have a business meeting at 12, come to the ballpark, eat McDonald's, and then have batting practice. But I'm telling you what, at 7:05, he was ready to play. And I used to look over, and he would talk to people on the on-deck circle. He'd be talking to kids and people right before he went up to the plate. And like I said, my mind was like racing on what I was going to do when I got to the plate, this and that. I didn't even know there were people behind me. It's just like, that's the different personalities you see in players.
All right, we'll do some Q&A. We got the mics.
Right here.
Okay.
Just jump.
I want to thank you, Paul, for so many years of such great baseball joy as you brought to us. My question is, Game 5, 1996 World Series, 2 outs, 2 on, Luis Polonia at the plate hits a line drive to a man with a broken hamstring. How bad was your hamstring when you made that catch? And what did Bernie and you talk about when you came in from the outfield?
You know what, it's funny because Joe Torre called me in the office before that game, and I wasn't moving very well, and he says, I don't know if I'm gonna play. And I think he was kind of testing. And I sat down and I'm just like shaking my head, and I'm just like, it's a World Series, and he's like, we'll talk about it. Well, he called me back 5 minutes later, and he says, you're in there. And so, thank goodness, I talked my way into that one. I was like, yes. So, it's the heat of the moment. It's probably the most well-pitched game that I remember. I mean, Pettit was unbelievable. And Jose Cardinal, who's our defensive coach, he would always like wave towels, because most of the time I was out there working on my hitting, thinking about my next at bat, so in between pitches, right? And so he is like waving the towel, and I'm out there with my head, I'm not seeing anything, and finally I hear, I think it was Mariano Duncan or somebody at second base screaming at me, and I look up, I'm looking in, and he's moving me to right center, 2 more steps, right before that ball was hit. He moved me 2 steps over, because Poloni wasn't getting around on a wet line. He wasn't striking out, but he was fouling everything off. And I had him played straight up. That's what our scouting report was. So he moved me over a couple steps. And obviously those steps meant a lot, because I wasn't running too well. And what I thought when I came in, I remember running in thinking, oh my God, if I'd have missed that ball. And all went through my head was Bill Buckner. Bill Buckner. Bill Buckner. That's all that went through there. Funny enough, that's all that went through my head if I'd have missed that ball. Bill Buckner. Bill Buckner.
Next question over here.
Hi, Paul. Thanks again for having us all here tonight with you. Obviously, we all know you can crush a ball, but translating that into the game of golf, I'm a huge avid golfer. I'm a 14 handicap. I'm just wondering how your golf game is these days, if you're still crushing a ball 350.
I hit it hard. I just got back. I got to play in the web.com, the thing down in South Carolina. And I play well, but it's everybody thinks that because you can hit a baseball, you can hit a golf ball. And the mechanics of baseball drive me nuts in golf, because golf is this body swing where baseball was all hands. And so it's a process, but I love the game. And that's pretty much what most players, Jeet's obsessed now too. We just got talking to him. So his handicap's going down, mine's kind of even handicap. I'm a 4. And but I've been a 4 for like 2 years. It's stopped. I've hit my ceiling, I think. But like I said, it's a lot of things in a golf swing. I play with some hockey players, and they're perfect because their slap shot is inside, where in baseball you're kind of over the top, and that's the last thing you want to do in golf. So don't work on your baseball swing if you want to do golf.
Next question is up front here. It's John.
Thanks, Paul, for taking the time to be with us. What are your thoughts on with statisticians in baseball? I read an article the other day talking about somebody's getting more loft to the ball because he's hitting a 1/4 of an inch lower than he did before. And I saw they put velo up on the scoreboard yesterday. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, we were jokingly saying, I won't even, I said something on the air the other night with Michael. He said something about exit velo. I'm like, what are you even talking about? It's just like, is that even a thing? But you know what, 1/4 of an inch on a bat, can be a home run or... You don't. I mean, it's a reaction and you're trying to square it up. But when you see, like Judge last night hit a 3-0 pitch, he just missed it. I mean, he just missed hitting that thing on the Grand Concourse. But, literally, it's a 1/4 of an inch where he just didn't quite square it up, where he just got under it. But you don't do anything to adjust to try to do that. It's all just a natural just a reaction. You've done it so many times. You know, you pick up the spin of the baseball, you track it, and you follow it.
By the way, you got Michael up now with the percentages after every inning, whether the team's
Oh,
gonna win,
yeah.
lose.
Yeah.
Where's he getting all that from?
Believe me, it's not from his own head. We got a statistician right next to us, believe me. And he speaks to it, and I look at him like, yeah, like you knew that right off the top of your head. Yeah. A lot of notes.
Next question over there.
Paul, first of all, thank you for being such a class act. It was noticed. You played on the 96, 97, 98 teams that were really put together through players who came up in the system, trades, and a few, I would say, lower profile free agent signings. Conan Key came late in their career. And then you played with teams that had the Giambis and the Clemenses and the A-Rods, which was at a certain point, the team was almost an all-star team and built by free agents. Was there any difference in the chemistry of those clubhouses?
Yeah, I think so. I think when I got traded over here, it was like the perfect time because I came over, Jimmy Key, Spike Owen, and Boggs. We all came over, and the Yankees had not won. And back then there was no really interleague. So you didn't know much about the American League. I knew Don Mattingly played for the Yankees. He was an icon. So he was the first guy that I sat down when I went into spring training and got to know. And it didn't take long to realize that, I wasn't in Cincinnati anymore. I mean, I walked out and Whitey Ford and Yogi Berra and Mickey Mantle and Joe DiMaggio were on the field in spring training. I'm like, wow, there's tradition here. There's something different. And but that team progressed. And in 95, 94 actually, we would have made the playoffs. 95, we made the playoffs, we lost. 96, it kept getting better and better and better as that core four came along. But there was kind of a rebound to the point. And later, when some of those other players came in, I didn't play with A-Rod, I had just retired. But the one thing I did notice was walking out for batting practice on the field, I was doing games, and looking over, and all these players had their separate stretching coaches and their separate other people. So there were like 10 different groups of people stretching. It wasn't a team thing anymore. With the Yankee team guy, everything was separated. And it just, to me, that seemed very, very strange. So in that sense, yes, the game does change when you bring in these star-studded teams. And I think if you'll watch now, they're kind of back to where we were in 95 and 96. The guys walk out together. The pitchers watch the starting pitcher warm up. Where, you have a game tonight, that's what you're here to do. It's not just, everybody has their own personnel seeing how great they can be that night.
Do you think that players realize how special it is to be a Yankee? I mean, is it that much more special than anything else?
It doesn't compare. I mean, I was very fortunate to win a World Series in 1990 in Cincinnati before I came to New York. And I thought it was, the coolest thing in the world. And, we drove downtown Cincinnati in our convertibles in front of 10,000 people. And then we went in 1996, and literally, when I lived out in Westchester, so I would drive to the ballpark, we would play the game, I would drive back to Westchester, didn't spend much time in the city. We went in 1996, and all of a sudden you're going through these parades and the people, and you realize how many people the Yankees affect, and how many people are involved in New York. And it just it kind of blew me away. And then the tradition's like no other. There's nothing like it. New York travels well. It doesn't matter where you are in the country. It doesn't matter what ballpark. There's Yankee fans. That's just the way it is. And it became. There's nothing better than getting off a bus at 4 o'clock in the morning in Kansas City, and there's Yankee fans waiting for stuff. You don't get that when you're with Cincinnati Reds. You get that because you're part of the New York Yankees. A lot of people say, hey, I loved you as a baseball player. My wife loved the Seinfeld that you did. These things don't happen if you don't play for the New York Yankees. And it's just, it didn't take me long to figure out that it's much different to be part of this franchise.
Next question is back here.
Thanks very much, Paul and Neil. as a kid growing up in the 70s, the late 70s, I loved watching the Yankees. There was that long hiatus, and when you came back, you were the beginning of that new era, that last era that we had. You also were very passionate about the game, and I have children who you try to teach, win or lose, be a good sport, go out there, but when those kids come home with that knot in their stomach and they don't care unless they won, what advice would you give them? Because, you know, you do have the record for most broken helmets, I heard.
Well, I just think that people are wired different. I mean, I used to watch Bernie Williams. I mean, he would strike out and go take a shower and walk out because he was confident he was going to do it tomorrow. Where Tino and I would be sitting in our lockers with our head down, just thinking, you know, the whole world just fell apart. So I think people are wired different. Enthusiasm and intensity, I don't think that you can ever have enough of it, because if it's not playing for the New York Yankees, you'll compete somewhere else. And I see my son, who's just out of college, in the business world, going at it the same way he did in sports, with just wanting to out-compete and outdo people. So it's not whether you're doing it for the New York Yankees, it's anywhere in life. And I always tell my kids, watch the way the New Yorkers go about their life. There's intensity, there's everything, and you know what? Be proud of it, because it's not everywhere. You know, you go to a baseball game in Cincinnati, 9 out of the 10 people that leave the ballpark don't even know if the Reds won. It's a social event. It's a great time. I have literally sat in traffic at midnight on the hutch when somebody, you know, tried to get under a bridge that wasn't supposed to, and been out in the middle of the street waiting in a traffic jam talking about the Yankee game that night with people on their way home. So there is a difference, and I loved it about New York, that people cared every single night, whether you win or lose.
So you don't think you cared more than everyone else, you just showed it differently?
Well, like I said, I didn't take losing very well, and I didn't take not doing well very well. And again, it goes back to I mean, I was always competing against my brothers. They were older, better, so you're always losing, so you're always trying to fight your way up. But I just think people are built that way. It's just the way it is.
You were kind of on every pitch.
There were too many cameras. You shouldn't have seen all that stuff.
I don't know if we've ever seen somebody more, you know, focused in on every possible situation that could happen. I mean, do you regret that, or was that healthy for you?
Well, I mean, there are times now that you're far enough away from it that you see these, and Yes likes to throw them up there once in a while, and you look at yourself like, what is wrong with you? But, you know, at the time, that's your life. That is your life. Every pitch, every at-bat, every game, that is your life. That's what you're putting it into. But there were times that, you know, I would snap and break something, and the night ended up okay. We won, or I got a hit, and then I would come home and my wife would meet me at the door. Do you know your kids who are watching the game? What is wrong with you? You have no explanation for it, because it's not a thought process. You just do it. You just react. You know.
Okay, next question.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. This was really fabulous. I have a two-part question. One is, how did you feel when you were traded to the Yankees? How did your family feel? And do you send Christmas cards to Roberto Kelly every year?
He had nothing to do with it. I mean, Jim Bowden was the general manager in Cincinnati. I still remember we were, my wife and I were cutting the grass in Cincinnati, Ohio.
You were literally cutting the grass?
I was going to say, we do that in Cincinnati. We cut the grass. Yeah. And it was on my answering service that I had been traded. And it's talk about stunned, because basically I grew up in Ohio. I was playing almost for the hometown team. And the first thing that comes to your mind when you're traded is, you know, hey, I suck. They want to get rid of me. You know, it's just kind of the way you feel. My wife was in tears and this and that. Gene Michael ended up calling and saying, you know, they had big plans and this and that. You don't know what to expect, because all I knew from playing in New York was from the Reds, staying at the Grand Hyatt, jumping on the bus, going to Shea Stadium, going back, and being overwhelmed with the city. But as a home player and living out and coming into the stadium, like I said, it is the best thing that ever happened to me. There's no doubt about it.
Ladies and gentlemen, this will be our final question. Paul does have to go to work tonight.
Got a pregame.
So-
Michael's gonna do it by himself.
Although Michael would prefer probably to do it by himself.
Last question.
Such pressure. I just want to say, the intensity and the passion you played with was so fabulous to watch all those years. And we were there at your last game, and we didn't want to let you go. That was just the most unbelievable moment. Maybe this will be fun. We were also at the Jeter ceremony last week, and Jeter said he wouldn't trade places with anybody. So I don't want to ask you that, but I just want to ask you, you played with so many amazing people, and you were so amazing. Is there any Yankee on the current team or any other Yankee, living or dead, that you wish you'd have the opportunity to play with and hang out in the clubhouse with?
Well, I mean, when you hear all the stories of, you know, Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle, Whitey Ford, I mean, you were just in awe. There were times where I sat in that couch in the locker room and talked to Yogi Berra, and it was just the life that he lived. It was unbelievable. They were just tougher than we were, you know, that old generation. But, you know, Babe Ruth, that name is just, you know, he's here. And, you know, he pretty much made popularity of sports and baseball. So if there was one person that, you know, you look at it and think, man, I wish I could have played with him, it'd probably be Babe Ruth because of the stories. And I'm sure the stories, just like everything else, get bigger and better every single year. You know? But thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.